All right, so like I said, we're going to talk the Huskies. They currently sit at 12th in the AP poll, behind Oklahoma, who's 10th, Oklahoma State, who's 11th. And I guess the question I kind of have for you guys is, can they still make the playoffs? They got a remaining schedule. This weekend they play UCLA. By the way, that's at 12:30. That's not a nighttime kickoff.
Oh, yeah.
Then another game next weekend against Oregon at home. A big test at Stanford on a Friday night. Then they play Utah and finish up with the Apple Cup against Wazoo. And then hopefully the Pac-12 championship. Just throwing that out there.
Right.
Is there enough teams there to beat in order to make the playoff? Obviously, I think some things have to happen, but is there enough there in the remaining schedule for the Dogs to make the playoff? Christian?
Seth, you go for it first. I want to hear what Seth has to say.
Not in their own schedule, no. They're going to need some help.
Okay.
They have 6 undefeated teams ahead of them in the poll right now, and 5 one-loss teams ahead of them too. And nobody on the the Huskies' remaining schedule is a big enough matchup that they're going to jump 7 or 8 of these other teams.
I'm gonna agree with you, Seth. Straight up for the Huskies, I don't think they're making the Final Four, the college football playoff. It's not even a matter of who they play and who they don't play. They're just not as good as they were last year. To me, people are questioning the ability of Jake Browning, and it's not so much the ability of Jake Browning, but it's the options and the threats that he has around him. I think that when you take away the fastest man who has ever played football in John Ross, and Chico McClatchy gets hurt, Dante Pettis is their only option from a receiving standpoint. I don't know any other receivers' names for the Huskies, and part of that could be my fault. But I think that the reason being is because there's no other threats there. Myles Gaskin's still on the team.
Yeah.
There's your running option.
So the duo of him and Coleman have provided a nice 1-2 punch.
Yeah, so they have a good run game, but as far as passing the ball, they don't have as many threats. It's going to make their offense worse, and I think that people are understanding that. There's no, 2 different receivers you have to cover. If you cover up Dante Pettis, you can probably shut down this UW offense, and I don't think that they are going to be able to do enough to get themselves in the conversation of the last 4 teams that should be playing college football.
Okay. Hypothetically saying, because, you talk about the offense. The defense, has been pretty stellar this year. Right now they're giving up 3.6 yards per game, which is actually first in front of the vaunted Alabama defense, who sits at 3.9 yards per game. If they kind of lean on that defense and score enough points, maybe let's say they win each game by an average of 21 points for these last 5 games. Does that change your opinion at all on if they do kind of make the playoff?
That stat is going to change dramatically once they start playing teams like Stanford and Washington State. Okay. They won't be near the top 5 by the time they end up playing Wazoo and Stanford.
Okay. The last 2 years, though, they have shut down Wazoo's passing defense. One of those was with a backup quarterback, but last year wasn't. I think they only gave up 14 points in that game.
DJ, that's a great stat, and it looks really pretty. But when you've done that against Colorado and teams like Colorado, Rutgers gave them a tough matchup. But
yeah.
And Montana State, didn't they play Montana State or Montana?
Montana, University of Montana.
So, that's going to change eventually. Good stat right now, but I don't think it's going to be that way towards the end.
Yeah, another interesting thing to point out is in each of the last 3 years for the Final Four teams, 3 out of the 4 teams have been one-loss teams.
That's fine, yeah.
In my opinion, I think you're going to see a lot change these next 5 weeks. You're going to have a lot of teams go down. I know there's a big one in Columbus this weekend with Ohio State. Penn State visits Columbus. That's a matchup of 2 versus 6. So somebody's going to lose there. Preferably, I would want to have Ohio State lose because that automatically puts them at 2 losses. They're not making the playoff there. And the SEC, you still got the Iron Bowl coming up. You got LSU versus Alabama. So you got a lot of big games coming up that could provide that loss to maybe bolster UW into the top 10 and maybe even to the top 4. What do you think, Seth?
I think It's tough for the Huskies right now simply because the Pac-12 is not very good this year. The Cougars just came off a very bad loss. USC this week lost 49-14 to Notre Dame.
Which Notre Dame actually jumped UW in the standings.
So with a blowout loss for some of these top teams in the Pac-12, I don't see how you can put the Huskies up there with these other teams who are like the Big Ten. You've got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin all playing each other, and the Huskies aren't playing any of those teams. We're playing teams that are a ways below that level.
And
I think from an outsider's perspective, going back to last year was essentially, kind of like, it was cool to like have UW in the Final Four just because like they haven't been good in so long. Like it was kind of just fun. It was probably fun for the people who are setting that thing up to go, we'll throw that team from Washington in there. And now people are more aware that, not by any fault of their own, but that preseason, pre-conference schedule is so soft. People are so aware of that now. And now that their one loss has come to a team like Arizona State and not a team with the reputation of a USC, that has done more damage than I think can be repaired.
One more thing, like you said right there, their one loss is to Arizona State. Arizona State actually beat Utah in a battle for first place in the Pac-12 South 30-10, so pretty handily. And if I'm not mistaken, that game was in Utah. So I think Arizona State is a better team than what we're giving them credit for.
No, that's fair, but if Arizona State would have entered, that UW game undefeated and then would have gone on to maybe have their one loss come to USC or something like that, they would be a team who was flirting with that top four because that would have been cool or hip or trendy to put Arizona State because they have, like UW, haven't been good in so long.
Yeah, and
that would have been trendy. Like this year was a prove it year for UW, and they dropped a game, and now I think have done too much damage to help themselves.
Yeah, and we'll see how real Arizona State is, because they have USC on their remaining schedule because they are in the South. So
the
I don't know.
problem with that is Arizona State's a 4-3 team. It's gonna look like a bad loss for UW, no matter what the final record is for Arizona State.
Yeah. So I think the main thing here is UW needs a lot of help. It looks pretty dark right now for UW. They don't have a high chance. But, until they're mathematically eliminated like the Mariners were at the end of the season, then I guess we'll hold on to that. Next Tuesday we'll see what the College Football Playoff Selection Committee thinks of them, because the rankings come out next Tuesday. So that can be something we revisit in next week's show. But for now, chances are slim. They need something to happen.